All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Big Boy. I want to talk to y'all a little bit about ham radio, one of my favorite hobbies. Back in '91, a good friend of mine I worked with for most of my career, WD5HKV, had been a ham since he was a young man and got me into it. And another local ham helped me out a lot at W5MAS, and I've been a ham operator since '91. The original ham license was five different licenses that were called novice, technician, general, advanced, and extra. And you had to learn 5 word per minute Morse code to get a novice license. You didn't have Morse code for tech. General was Morse code 13. Advanced was no Morse, and electric was extra was 20 word per minute Morse. And what each class license give you, the novice give you access to several CW sections on some low bands, plus give you voice access on a 10-meter band. Technician class give you access to all the VHF, UHF privileges, and the general, advanced, and extra just lets you get more and more privileges in the lower bands. Um, I passed 5 word per minute code. I worked hard back then to try to get my 13 word per minute, but I never could hear it. As a matter of fact, in '92, on an unrelated incident, I had to take a physical in the Army for the reserve unit I was in. And when the audiologist called me out and talked to me, he had no idea I was a ham operator. I never had put it in my Army records. He says, "Good thing you're not in the old school signal corps because doing Morse code, because son, you can't hear it. Once it gets over about 10 words a minute, all you're going to hear is one solid tone. Your hearing's so messed up you can't hear the breaks." Well, at that time, I could have used that as a medical excuse to upgrade, but at that time in ham radio, that really wasn't like. So 10-meter band was wide open. I was making all kinds of contacts. And then in the later '90s, I got heavily involved in an Air Force Reserve unit I was in, their communications. And after I was on the radio so much there, I didn't want to get on it much at home. So decided to get back into it in about '06. They dropped the Morse code. I was able to upgrade my license all the way to extra class, and I got into it. A lot of people ask me how expensive a hobby this is. Well, as if any hobby, it can be somewhat expensive, but it can be as expensive as you want to make it. A good friend of mine, OHKV, told me, he said, "Big Boy," I asked him about uh, antennas. He said, "My rule of thumb is I don't put any antennas up more than I can afford to have blowed down." And you can talk the world on a piece of wire if it's cut right. Wire dipoles work great. That's what I'm using now. And I'll talk more about that here in a minute when we get into what you can and can't do. One thing you'll find out in ham radio, my personal career in communications spans public service, military, and ham radio. Public service, I was a volunteer fireman for a number of years. Military, I learned military radio operations, tactical FM ground communications as an infantry unit in the Army Reserve. And in the Air Force Reserve, I did tactical FM ground communications and single sideband long range communications for them. And you'll find out in ham radio and any kind of radio operator, you've got three basic kinds of radio operators. Number one, you got good operators that know their equipment, clear, concise with their messages, say what needs to be said, get on the air, get off, and just really know how to run their equipment. I like to think I was a decent operator. I wasn't the best, but I could hold my own. The second type of operator you're going to find is the guy that should never be allowed access to a microphone, who either don't know how to use his equipment right or won't shut up, things like that. And the third class is people you can't get on the radio. So just enjoy the hobby. It's a fun hobby to get into, and a lot of people ask me how expensive to get into it. Well, nowadays it's not near as expensive as it was when I got into it. And I'll give you an example of radio costs. HF, the expensive radios. My first radio was an ICOM 701 all transistor radio with a matching power supply and matching desk mic that I bought used in 1991 for $300. That radio, brand new in 1978, sold for $1,695. I looked it up in some old ham radio catalogs, and that's what it sold for. Uh, I'll get into my HF radio and cost on that in a minute. But say you want to get your it's called a tech new. Let me read back up here. The three new licenses are technician, general, and extra. Technician class will give you access to 10 meters plus all the VHF, UHF. And if you just want to keep up with local events, talk local, Skywarn, things like that, you can get into it for under $100. These talkies here are Baofengs. This is a 5-watt talkie. I give $35 for it on Amazon. All right. Works great. It's a dual band. It covers the VHF and UHF band, plus it has public service on it also. This next one is another Baofeng. It's an 8-watt version. And I've added this upgraded longer antenna to it. And I probably got $60 tied up in that radio. VHF, UHF. I can hit repeaters 20 miles away with it from my house. Works great. Good, inexpensive way to get into the hobby and enjoy it. Now, if you get into HF, it's going to be a bigger outlay of money. This particular radio here is a Yaesu FT897D model that covers all the HF bands, 6 meters, VHF, and UHF. One reason I picked that radio, it was a ruggedized radio, military grade ruggedness. That's 100-watt radio. I've had it since 06. Finally had to send it to the shop about 2 weeks ago to get a little glitch fixed, but it's been a great radio. Real easy to program. Everything now is going to have microprocessor and programming screens on it, so it's super easy to program. I'm running a G5RV dipole antenna on a push-up pole. I've talked all over the world with it. It's, you can get more expensive antennas up and towers and rotors and Yagi beams, and they work great, but don't let that deter you. You can put up a piece of wire if it's cut right, coax, a push-up pole, and you're good to go. You can talk around the world with it if conditions are right. This other radio here is an older Kenwood 2-meter mobile. It's one of the first radios when they first started going to microprocessor control radios. It's a good radio. I've had it for 20 years. But it's an absolute beast to program. I'm not good at programming it. It's one of them that you have to push 3 keys at the same time, and you got a nanosecond to make your decision. If you don't, it goes right back to where it started from. The Yaesu, you can program it. Take your time, walk through the steps, it'll program easily. One thing about ham radios, they're set up on 12-volt DC for use in emergencies. I've done emergency communications back in Ice Storm of 2000. We had a pretty big event here, and the power was down, phones were down. I did emergency communications using a 2-meter mobile with a car battery in my house, and worked fine. Back there in the corner, let me see if I can turn this where you can see it a little better. That's a 35-amp power supply. It's just got an extra desk mic sitting on it right now. And this on the wall is a power distribution strip. I decided to clean my setup up a little bit. You don't have to have that. You can hook them straight there, but you have to be careful. I had a pretty good wad of wires on my power supply. Hobby's great. I mean, you'll have a little outlay of money, but one thing good about this hobby, once you get into it, whatever level you want to, you really don't have to spend any more money. This radio I bought, this radio, power supply, 2 antennas, the tuner, and that add-on meter back in 06 had about $1,200 tied up in it. And up until the other day when I had to have it repaired, it hadn't cost me a nickel since 06. So, you can get into this hobby as expensive or as inexpensive as you want to. I've actually, you notice in the background here, these postcards hanging on the wall, those are QSL cards. I've worked 32 different countries on the radio and about 35 of the states in this country. So it's a lot of people think it's a nerd hobby. I don't. I like it. Being able to communicate, I liked it in the military. And it's just a fun hobby to get into. A lot of people don't like it. That's why you can get into it however deep you want to. The VHF UHF first license, technician class license, get you one of these cheap handhelds. You never can tell when that can get you out of a jam somehow. This kind of quick video, I just call it ham radio on a budget. It's not a break the bank hobby. If you want to get into where you can talk around the world, yes, you're going to have to outlay some more money than that. Several good websites to look at stuff. QRZ.com is one of the best ones. ARRL.org is another good one that's to help decide on if you want to get into this. And check your local area for ham clubs. Hams love to talk, and they'll be glad to help you get into this any way you can. And any of you that know me and can contact me, I'll be glad to help you any way I can. It's a fun hobby. It's a useful hobby. It used to be used a lot more with the military than what it is now. But I think it's something good to have around for hard times when things do go bad, you'll still be able to communicate. Well, hopefully this hadn't confused too many people. Anybody got any questions? Leave me a comment. Leave me a like. Hope some of you take my advice and look into getting into this hobby. Everybody have a great week. This is Big Boy. Adios.